Margaret Walker found out she had cancer on a cold Tuesday morning. The doctor didn't say much. "The tumor is malignant," he said softly. "We need to start treatment as soon as possible." She nodded, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. After the appointment, she stopped by the pharmacy. Then the grocery store: almond milk, whole grain bread, a small box of strawberries for Olivia. On the crowded evening bus, she stood quietly, file pressed to her side, grocery bag dangling from one hand. No one noticed her. No one knew. At home, everything looked the same. The TV murmured in the background. Edward read the paper. Layla scrolled her phone with one hand and poured tea with the other. Olivia was coloring at the kitchen table. Margaret placed the file on the coffee table. Not hidden, not explained. Her name printed clearly on the front: Margaret E. Walker. Biopsy result. Suspicious mass. 3 days passed. No one asked. The file sat between the remote control and a bowl of fruit. Layla placed her coffee cup on top of it. Edward stacked his folded newspaper beside it. Mark dropped his car keys right over the printed warning. No one opened it. Only on Wednesday evening, when Margaret didn't cook dinner, when the kitchen was quiet, the stove cold, the usual scent of garlic and pepper missing, did anyone realize something was off. But not because they were worried about her. Because the table was empty. Margaret lived with her husband Edward in a quiet house on the edge of town. After retiring, he spent his time reading, taking violin lessons, and attending an elite art club. Margaret, 65 years old, remained behind the scenes, laundry, cooking, school pickups, every dinner planned to the minute. No one told her to do it, but everyone was used to it being done. Her son Mark lived nearby with his wife Layla and their 2 kids. They stopped by Margaret's house almost every day, to eat, to drop off the children, to wait for something warm on the table. 3 days ago, Margaret found out she had cancer. When she came back from the hospital, she placed the medical file on the living room table. No one asked. No one opened it. They walked past it dozens of times a day, as if her name printed on the cover was invisible. Margaret had once studied fine arts. She dreamed of opening a small studio to teach children how to paint. But after marrying Edward, all of that slipped away. "You should stay home," he said. "I'll handle the outside world." So she learned to cook instead of paint. Learned to care for a house instead of a dream. On Wednesday evening, Margaret didn't cook dinner. That's when they panicked. Mark called. "Why didn't you pick up Zach?" Edward asked, "What's for dinner tonight?" Layla frowned. "Is there anything to eat? The kids are starving." No one asked, "Are you okay?" "Mom, did your appointment go?" "Well, I saw the file on the table. Is something wrong?" Margaret looked at each of them, then quietly stepped out onto the porch. The night was cold. She held the edge of the file tightly. The wind lifted one of the pages. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to anymore. The next morning, Margaret woke up early as usual. The sky was still dark. A thin mist hung across the lawn. But she didn't make coffee, didn't wash the cups, didn't turn on the kitchen light. Instead, she pulled an old suitcase from the back of the closet, the one she last used for Mark's wedding. She packed slowly. A few changes of clothes, her medication, the hospital file, a savings pass book, a small photo frame, and one sketchbook still unfinished of a lavender field. She left before the house woke up. No note, no goodbye, just the medical file left open on the table. Page 1 exposed. She took a taxi straight to the airport. Didn't book anything online. She didn't know how. At the counter, she looked at the screen full of destinations, paused and pointed. "First flight to Portland, please," she said. The woman behind the counter glanced up, white hair, worn coat, a face strangely calm. "There's one at 11 p.m. tonight. Are you sure?" Margaret nodded. "I've got all day to wait." She rented a small room near the botanical garden. Not fancy, but quiet. The window overlooked a patch of green, soaked in soft afternoon light. On her first day, she walked along the river. On the second, she bought paint. On the third, she painted her room, the morning light on the walls, the cracks in the ceiling, the tiny wildflowers left on the table by the landlord. No one called, no one texted. Her phone stayed off, and yet the world kept spinning. A week passed before she turned it back on. The messages came in like flood water. "I don't know where you are. We're all worried." Zach cried all afternoon. "Layla doesn't know how to make your soup." Dad's stomach flared up again. "He's been in bed." One message from Mark stood out cold and sharp. "If you don't want to be our mother anymore, then don't come back." Margaret stared at the screen for a while, then replied with one simple line, I'm no longer your unpaid help. If you need something, handle it yourselves. Then she turned the phone off, again. That afternoon, she sat near the window. Light spilled across her sketch pad. She began painting a woman standing on a bridge coat, fluttering in the windsuit case in hand, eyes facing a horizon lined with pale violet hills. She didn't paint her face, just her posture, and all the open sky behind her. Margaret stayed in Portland longer than she'd planned. The little room near the botanical garden slowly became home. She planted herbs on the windowsill, hung her paintings on bare walls. Every morning she opened the window and let in the light. There were no voices calling for her, no chores waiting, no dinner to prepare. Only the soft sound of brushes sweeping across paper, only her breath, her rhythm. A few weeks and a young woman named Grace, someone from the pharmacy Margaret visited, invited her to a local weekend art circle. Margaret came just to watch, but then she sat down, opened a box of paints, and began. Someone asked if she had studied art. She smiled, said quietly, "It's been a long time." No one knew that she hadn't painted in over 40 years, and no one needed to. In that circle, the past didn't matter. Grace became a quiet companion. She didn't pry. She helped Margaret navigate rideshare apps, taught her how to pay with her phone, showed her how to post photos of her paintings online. For the first time, Margaret's work appeared on an art page. No name, no backstory, just a woman in sunlight, painting. One afternoon, a plain envelope arrived. Inside was her finalized divorce certificate. No note, no apology, just a sentence typed neatly at the bottom. Reason irreconcilable differences. She folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. No sadness, no anger. Outside the window, the lavender she planted had begun to bloom. She didn't return to the old house. They would learn. To cook their own meals, to ask each other how they're doing, to notice what's been sitting on the table for 3 days. On the morning of her 66th birthday, Margaret stood in front of a mirror. Her hair was shorter, her skin softer with time, but her posture was straight, and her eyes were clear. In the glass she saw herself, fully. Not a mother to be summoned, not a wife to be forgotten. Just Margaret, enough. Sometimes to live fully you must walk away from the life you spent decades building. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself.